Yo, what's good? It's Miss Dora, and I know y'all see the title of the video, so let's just jump straight into things, alright? Pokemon Legends ZA could and should have been an amazing game, instead of one that, while often is definitely fun, I'm not gonna deny that, ends up being just alright to good at best overall in my opinion. Like a 7, maybe a 7.5 out of 10. And I don't feel like I'm all that alone in having such an opinion either. What's crazy is they could have made changes or additions to this game that for Nintendo and Game Freak really wouldn't be a big ass that would ultimately make it a pretty phenomenal title. And no, I'm not talking about the quality of the graphics. If you don't believe me, I'm gonna tell you exactly how easy it would have been. Everything I'm about to mention is something that I think most of us, even die-hard fans of Pokemon and defenders of the recent Legends ZA game, would agree is completely within Nintendo and Game Freak's capability to implement in this very game. Nintendo simply chose not to help Game Freak do so, or surprisingly, didn't think of some of this stuff themselves. I would be really shocked if that was the case. These are going to be features and aspects that I think even the most avid defenders of this game are going to look at and be like, damn. Thinking about what could have been, I can't help but look at this game at least a bit differently. The best part is, I'm not going after any of that low-hanging fruit on this one, okay? Things like, again, better graphical textures, better performance, and even the addition of voice acting. Not going to be talking about that, really. Those are all things that most people agree should be in this game, but those desired improvements have been talked about a ton already. So with the highlight of this game easily being its pretty fun gameplay, at least when compared to previous Pokemon games, I'm going to primarily focus on gameplay aspects to show how this game could and again should have been amazing. Well, there is one thing I'm going to talk about that isn't entirely gameplay related, but trust me when I say I don't think it's asking for a lot in that aspect, nor do I think it would have proven entirely difficult for companies such as Nintendo or Game Freak. For context, or I guess you could say credentials, I would say I'm a Pokemon fan. I've loved Pokemon since I was very young and only stopped checking out every single title around Sun and Moon, only picking up some of the games here and there after that. But I did really dig Legends Arceus and was excited that in gameplay at least, ZA seemed to be an evolution of that title. So I was at least a little curious about ZA. I'm not some outside hater on this issue for sure. So as for how this game could have very feasibly been better, we're going to start with the Z to A ranking up concept for the story. Not for online battles, just for the base game, the story, which is honestly what interested me the most about this game. With that being said though, what were they thinking having you skip half of the damn ranks? I have to know. I am so curious to know how that meeting where they ended up making that decision during development went down. I would give not anything, but I'd give a fair amount to have been present during that, right? Now, before some of you even start, let me nip this in the bud right now, okay? Some people are going to say, well, an entire grind from Z to A would have been repetitive. People would have gotten bored with ranking up as it's currently implemented in the game. And yeah, welcome now to the entire point of this video. It didn't have to be repetitive. It very easily could have been exciting throughout the entire process, and I'll tell you how. Either every few nights, for the battle zones, or just at every few ranks in general, they could have changed the battle type that takes place, either for the zones or at least for the rank up battles themselves, but for the zones would definitely for sure be preferable. Check it out. I don't think what I'm about to propose would have been too difficult to do. Imagine, right? You just got to rank Y in the game. Next up is rank X, but you get to the battle zone and all of a sudden, instead of trainers wandering around solo, you see pairs of trainers walking around teaming up. Just like, I don't know, the very beginning of the game showcases itself. In the tutorial, there are 2 trainers that accidentally steal your stuff and use that opportunity to battle you and Tawny/Urbane. How cool would it be if for the first time ever, a Pokemon game starts off with a double battle? But yeah, back to the battle zones, right? So imagine that if every zone during rank X, or just zones in general every few nights throughout all of the ranks, featured only double battles. That'd go a long way from keeping the Z to A rank grind from being boring during the game story. Actually, it'd make it incredibly fun. As for how you control 2 Pokemon at once, it's simple, at least to me. I obviously don't know how it would pan out when you actually play it, but in premise it seems simple in my opinion. You know how you press ZL or the left trigger to target a Pokemon, to aim at a Pokemon when yours is out, right? And then your moves for that Pokemon pop up. Well, for your second Pokemon that you have out, just make it to where while you're aiming, you press R or the right shoulder button to switch what Pokemon you're controlling and which moves you see at that time. Now, some people may say, nah, with the way the action combat works out, that would be too chaotic, it'd be too fast paced. Now me, I'd say that sounds like fun, but nevertheless, I still have some counterpoints to that. Firstly, being, yeah, it would be chaotic, it'd be fast paced, just like the free-for-all online ranked battles. And 2, you could still keep the whole double battle thing, but prior to entering the zone or at the very beginning when you enter it, the entirety of Team MZ is there at the entrance, and you can optionally choose any of one of those 3 to team up with for that zone as an AI battle companion, which has been done for double battles in Pokemon games before. With us being a quote-unquote team and all, you don't really feel it throughout the game, at least not for the first half of the ranks. This would help fix that. You could even have it to where rank up battles for both you and a given member of Team MZ, both of y'all, both you and your teammates' rank ups would be on the line for that battle. So if you don't perform well in said battle, if you don't win it, if you lose, you cause some mistakes or whatever, it's not just you who loses out, really upping the stakes. I think Naveen and Lita are fun characters personality wise who have some really cool designs, so I personally would love to battle alongside them. Also, you remember how I mentioned the free-for-all 4-way battles you get to play in online? Yeah, add that to the mix too. Every few ranks or nights, make it to where you either have to get your rank up ticket via those free-for-all matches in a zone, or that 4 people have earned the chance to rank up simultaneously. That's you get paired up against 3 other trainers as your opponents, but only one who wins that free-for-all will actually move up a rank. That sounds pretty dope to me, and makes it to where on a given night or rank, you'd have 3 different options for battles that could pop up, and it would even have the benefit of, without online in PvE in the base game, introducing players to those battles pretty consistently, pretty often. Lastly, for the gameplay, for this combat part, right? Lastly, environmental hazards, y'all. We finally have 3D Pokemon battles with action real-time combat close to like the anime has. So this seems like a no-brainer. Certain battle zones, or at the very least rank up battles, could have taken place in certain zones or arenas that have environments or biomes which introduce some hazards you gotta dodge and navigate around during combat. For example, a battle arena that's like a cave, right? Which has falling rocks periodically that you have to avoid, but they also crowd up the battlefield after falling. So you end up having to fight around them too, kind of like the Rock Tomb move that already does exist in this very game. With those additions being implemented, I'd see the grind from Z to A not only being fulfilling, but fun as hell. To incentivize this, make it so that certain clothing options you can shop for are limited to certain ranks, or bring back seals from Diamond and Pearl. fans would go nuts if they could customize the effects of their Pokeballs again. Those are extra things, the whole clothing and seals thing. I don't think those would be as necessary, but it would still be cool to have them, in my opinion. I got one last extra thing I do want to mention for combat and the grind from Z today. I lied. I got one more thing. This is just a me personally thing, right? But I've been having a lot of fun with the combat in this game sometimes, and I suspect more so than most players. That's because I purposefully, for my playthroughs only, I purposefully limit myself in combat to the number of Pokemon my opponent has for battle zones, but especially those rank up battles. It's, something that I felt added a lot of fun and intensity to this game for me, since at least the rank up opponents that you end up fighting, their AI really isn't all that bad, especially if y'all got the same number of Pokemon. Those fights can get tense thanks to the cooldown timer on healing items. Even if I had more Pokemon than them in my party, if they had 3 Pokemon, I myself would only send out 3 during that battle, and if those 3 I sent out fainted, then I considered it a loss. I lost fair and square, which I would then, consider a blackout as well. So I would restart the game. Now, I couldn't enforce a penalty for losses, such as, losing money or anything like that, at least not that I could think of, but it still nevertheless made battles feel like something I really had to lock in on. It's kind of like a Nuzlocke, making extra rules for yourself to freshen up the experience. Instead of it being freshening up the experience of a game you've played a few times before, it's just making the game more fun on the first go around, which, hey, it's kind of sad that I have to do this, but hey, you got to get your kicks how you get your kicks, I guess, right? So with that being said, I feel like the game limiting the amount of Pokemon you're able to bring with you into a battle zone or to a rank up battle based on your rank could be honestly kind of fun. Imagine at rank Z only being able to bring like 2 or 3 Pokemon into the zone with you, and your access to the box is cut off, so you can't swap them out either. Not for when you're out in the world and in the catching zones and stuff like that, just for the battle zones and your rank up battles, right? Think about it. Zones, even early on, are pretty dang trivial because, well, you already probably have a full team of 6 Pokemon by that point, and your opponents only have like 1 or 2. But if you were locked into having an amount similar to them, each battle would still be a risk. Not all of them entirely, some opponents could still have 1 or 2, while maybe you start out with a team of 3 max, but still, those battles would be more of a risk. You could, of course, still heal up your team in between battles, definitely does. So I don't really see this as like a difficulty for difficulty's sake thing. It's more of a gameplay feel thing, but yeah, you know what I'm saying? As you rank up, you would of course earn permissions to use more and more of your team slots, eventually reaching a full 6. Not too late into the game, I don't think that would be a good idea, but just something around like rank O or N or something. Again, that's kind of an extra feature that I do think would have been cool to throw in. That would definitely not be something that's too difficult to implement, right? If let's say they were developing until the very end, until the very last moment possible, they were working on code for this game, I think such a feature like that would have taken like, I don't know, I have no idea, but I feel like that's not something that if they had to throw a delay for this title out for, it wouldn't be a very long one. You know what I'm saying? But fun fact, by the way, there's an ability in the box item of the box of your menu. Essentially, there's an ability in there to set a locked team, I believe, right? This is something that, you can kind of enforce for yourself by utilizing that box. Again, similar to a Nuzlocke, with that feature making it a bit easier to constantly be moving Pokemon around like that, All of these changes or additions combined, though, make for a Pokemon Legends ZA I can see myself coming back to over and over. I'm telling you, trying out different teams to rank up with and stuff like that. A game that, even if it, lacking in other areas, would make up for it even more in the gameplay department. And I hope you see now where I'm coming from with my opinion that these implementations don't seem all that far-fetched based on what's already in this very game. It's at least a much easier ask than something like, oh, they should have added voice acting, or they should add voice acting now, or the game should be better graphically, in fidelity terms, or there should be more 3D textures, things like that. The last aspect of gameplay, dang, I've said that multiple times. I have set myself up for quite some failure with this script. I put last thing for gameplay like 3 times. Anyway, another thing that I think if included would make this the Pokemon Legends ZA that fans deserve: more Pokemon interactions. Well, I'm thinking about it now. Maybe that was because it was gameplay battling, but anyways, right? But yeah, more Pokemon interactions, y'all. Why can I not pet my Pokemon when I'm just out in the city? That was a feature in previous Pokemon games. Yes, getting to sit with them on benches and at the outside of cafes is cool and all, but the Pokemon are the main draw. Like, come on. So much more could have been done in this regard. It'd be awesome if we were able to, feed them, celebrate with them after battle, maybe a high five, a fist bump, a head nuzzle for Pokemon that are, quadrupedal, or even being able to carry some of the smaller Pokemon on our bags. Little things like that would definitely go a long way. And again, don't require anything too crazy that this game's engine doesn't seem like it isn't capable of handling, nor does it seem like something that the dev team hasn't gotten close to implementing already. There's definitely interactions with Pokemon in cutscenes that players would love to have as options just during regular gameplay. Okay, so, this is just overall. I'm not going to say gameplay again. I'm not going to mess up again. But finally, overall, we've done the gameplay stuff, but this is just the last thing overall, right? For just how simple it would be for this game to be much improved in general, Pokemon Legends ZA desperately needed better artistic direction. Now, again, I'm not talking about increasing graphical fidelity. I know some of y'all are like, why is he saying this so much? Because I'm saying it because someone is going to ignore everything in this video and say they don't need to make the graphics look better. That's not, but look better in terms of fidelity. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what this is about. I'm just talking about how the overall artistic design and vibes of this game visually should be just outright better, because as it stands right now, the game is incredibly bland in this aspect. So much of this game is boring to look at, save for in one aspect entirely and kind of in another aspect, that being the character designs entirely. Oh my goodness, the character designs are just straight up dope in this game. I will give Legends ZA credit where it deserves it. There's really no other way to put it. Canary, Naveen, Lita, Corbeau. I think all those characters are just so incredibly cool. Obviously this is something that's definitely subjective, subjective talking point. But the character designs, I feel like most people are going to agree as a whole look fantastic. And at the very least, it doesn't seem like much of a stretch for pretty much everyone to look at these character designs and go, yeah, a lot of thought and effort was put into them. As for the aspect where artistic design is kind of okay, all right, that's the new Mega Evolutions, where I feel like they were such a mixed bag. Not outright awful across the board, definitely not in my opinion, but for the new Mega Evolutions we got, I've seen so many over and over. I've seen 50-50 opinions of the overall spread of new megas from a multitude of fans. But still, some are definitely pretty dope, but just, it should have been a home run, you know what I'm saying? Back to my point though. I'd say artistically, some of that same effort and thought that went into those previous two aspects I mentioned is evidently not present in the environments and world design, which to me is pretty much half of the game you're interacting with visually, the other half being the Pokemon themselves and the other characters, of course. But yeah, you're going on an adventure in the city, which from a visual standpoint does nothing for the eyes artistically. Entire districts look just outright similar, being visually indistinct from one another. For the wild zones, there's only one that has a different biome to it. I'm pretty sure there's only one that has even a slightly different biome or environment to it, and that's this wild zone that has, it's an ice/frozen tundra kind of environment. So if that was possible, if there was going to be that one wild zone that was different in its biome, why aren't there more? If anything, there being only one zone that stands out only makes people crave variation that much more. At night, there's not really anything appealing, no appealing decorative lighting anywhere to be found. Nothing that's festive or inviting particularly, at least not enough to really make an impact, you know what I'm saying? The only exception to this is the sewers, which yes, is a different location entirely, and it does look all right. I'm not going to say it looks outright awful, but why settle for okay? Why settle for all right? You know, the majority of your time being spent in this samey looking city and a small portion in the sewers, again, don't do much for the eyes. So why should that be the case? Another YouTuber pointed this out, but the city is supposed to be heavily inspired by Paris, by French culture. You know, what's one of the first things that the world over thinks of when they think Paris? Cafes. And yet you cannot physically enter a single one of them to enjoy a cup of coffee. You can do so outside, but for those that love taking pictures with their favorite Pokemon, how much better would this game be if you could actually go inside the cafes to snap a bunch of cute pictures, with each cafe having different mood lighting, decorations, and motifs and slash themes to them that extends to the environments out in the city as well. You're not really getting much of a different vibe for snapping pictures or just being out in the city, out and about in general, regardless of where in Lumio City you're in. For the most part, almost entirely everything is going to feel samey or look samey. They did not need to improve graphics to implement this, by the way. Now, in my opinion, keep the 2D textures for walls and windows if you want. And I'm not asking for them to increase the resolution of the 3D assets they do have in the game. But if you're gonna have presentation that's low in graphical fidelity, still put some effort into even that artistically. As things stand with the game currently, artistically, outside of character designs and some of the mega evolutions for me personally, Pokemon Legends EA just isn't really fun to look at, to interact with visually. And for any $70 game, that shouldn't be the case, but especially most of all, something from Nintendo and of the Pokemon IP, considering just how much money both of them rake in. I'm talking billions, y'all. Most people know this is billions with a B dollars they are raking in. Look, Nintendo wants to be this, be unstoppable and without equal in gaming so bad that most of us can just feel this. They have this obsession almost with being undisputed. But what's funny about that is the answer to achieving that very goal is staring them in the face, inches away. If they produced Pokemon games, Nintendo doesn't produce, but if their companies that are under them, or if Nintendo themselves, first party development, whatever, if they made Pokemon games on par with or exceeding the quality of their competitors, if they made games like that were Pokemon games, given how insanely strong, nostalgic, and beloved this IP is, other companies would truly struggle to keep up with them. Their aspirations, the solutions to them are staring at them in the face, and yet they just choose to ignore those solutions because they're both satisfied with how how Pokemon sells currently. And unfortunately, a large portion of the fans will purchase these games regardless of their quality. They don't really care. They're gonna consume it no matter what. But if these games were as great as I know, they can be, and how as great as and a bunch of us know they truly could be, implementing some of these very changes I mentioned and much more, they would turn into games that gamers simply couldn't ignore even if they wanted to, for a large amount of them that sometimes won't even look twice at this kind of game, that grew up of Pokemon but grew out of the games themselves. But yeah, those are my points for how easy of a layup this game should have been, y'all. Improved graphics, added voice acting, and not having windows painted to walls as a 2D image in 3D environments would of course been very nice, but I feel like I just showcased how Pokemon Legends ZA very well could have leaned even further into its existing strengths to be, something truly special in spite of those previously mentioned shortcomings. Please be sure to tell me what you thought of some of my proposed changes, as well as what kind of changes or additions you would make to Legends ZA to elevate it to that next level. I'm Mistora, and as always, I'll catch you on the next one.